We're live. I don't think that we're on Twitter, Matt. I don't think that worked, but we're on YouTube, so that's good. Great to have you back on. I know we have a day off from training camp, which is much needed after that early grind, right? You're not used to being anywhere throughout, I guess, all 2020 and then 2021. But then the summer, especially, it's a little quiet, right? We're riding from home. And then we had 5 straight days at camp, followed by a day off. And now we're on the 3-1 schedule. So we had 3 more days. Today's the day off. Today's the day to collect inventory, go back through what happened. And we've now been out at the 49ers facility for 8 days. Everybody's talking about Trey Lance, but there's a whole lot going on out there, even outside the quarterback. It's been a fun camp so far.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to assess. The 49ers are done with their install, the second time they've installed the offense this year. And they're probably doing the same thing we're doing, just kind of taking a pause and seeing where things are. And Kyle Shanahan has said that, once that full installation is in, that's when they're able to start assessing players, figuring out lineups and who's going to be working with what group, et cetera, et cetera. So probably they're having or they probably already had a series of similar meetings at team headquarters today.
Well, let's just chart through the schedule of what's ahead. Friday, Saturday, Sunday is 3 days on again. Saturday is going to be fun because it's going to be in Levi's Stadium. That's the Dwight Clark Day 8-7 practice, August 7th. And then we move on to another off day on Monday, followed by another 3 on. But after that 3 on, stuff changes because the first preseason game is next Saturday, August 14th against Kansas City. And I was telling the viewers yesterday, Matt, that I see that preseason game against the Chiefs as a major data point in evaluating not just all the position battles, but especially what's happening at quarterback. Because right now the 49ers have 2 parallel paths going on at quarterback. You have Jimmy Garoppolo working with the first team, doing what he needs to do to iron out what Kyle Shanahan wants him to iron out. And you have Trey Lance not only working with the second team or against the second team defense, but Trey Lance dominating the second team defense to the point where it doesn't really seem fair to have Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Trey Lance against the 49ers backups. So that's got everybody, really itching to see Trey Lance against better competition. But because of these parallel paths, because Shanahan wants to give Garoppolo all the first team work, to me, it seems like it's going to be hard to get that done in practice. So I think that the better competition for Trey Lance, the next milestone, might be that August 14th preseason game against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I see Lance getting the most snaps out of all of these quarterbacks during the preseason. I mean, let's just take the 49ers for their word and assume that Jimmy Garoppolo is the starter heading into the regular season. Lance would still be the number 2. So, I mean, he needs to be ready in case, Jimmy Garoppolo hits his thumb against, his center's helmet and has to come out of a game. I mean, it could be anything. As good as Lance has been, I think the 49ers still want to get as many snaps, as many reps as he can possibly get. And you're right, doing it against another team's defense, maybe even the Chiefs will leave in their starting defense for a series longer, and he'll be going against some ones, which would be a nice change of pace for him. And that really is sort of the thing to keep in mind when you're reading these glowing, and it's hard not to write glowing reviews of practice of Lance. One big difference is that Lance is going against a number 2 defense all the time. And sometimes, as you noted, has George Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. And when you drop back and you see that George Kittle is being covered by Jonas Griffith, a undrafted rookie last year out of Buffalo, yeah, I think he's probably going to go to George Kittle on the play. So, and you would expect him to take advantage of that. You can't fault him for doing so. But you're right. It would be nice to kind of ratchet up the pressure again and give him some more meaningful types of snaps.
Hey, and before we disrespect Jonas Griffith too much, he actually is the player who has the interception of Trey Lance. And I thought it was nicer than Fred Warner's interception of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, and Jonas Griffith has looked good. I mean, he's one of the few linebackers on this team with size. He's 6'4", and he's moving around well. He's been the middle linebacker with the number 2 defense. So a lot of responsibility he's been given. He's taken to it well. He just happens to be in coverage a lot on these mismatch type of things. And kudos to Trey Lance for noting it. It's not just George Kittle. That's an obvious matchup for a linebacker, but sometimes he has to cover, what was it, Trent Sherfield the other day. He's been having to cover some wide receivers too. So I'm sure D'Amico Ryans is seeing that and thinking, maybe that's not the best coverage package that we can put out there. But he's of sort of under the radar guys I've been watching. He's one of them. I put Jared Maiden, the safety slash cornerback slash nickel cornerback slash special teams gunner in that category too. But there's some younger guys, under the radar guys, who have stood out over these first 7 days.
Well, I just popped open the depth chart right here to give people a visual illustration of what's happening at linebacker. So, I mean, I'm going to have to update this because, I haven't seen too much from James Burgess. So, possibly you do get a Flanagan Fowles or a Jonas Griffith to make the team instead of the veteran James Burgess, who the 49ers signed. But obviously one change that I've already made at linebacker is Marcel Harris switching positions from safety. So I have him highlighted there. I think your top three, assuming Al-Shaair comes back healthy, because right now he's dealing with a knee sprain, I think your top three are essentially set. I guess Al-Shaair, especially with injury now, is going to have to maybe battle something out with Flanagan Fowles or Jonas Griffith. But your top two for sure are locked in with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. I do think that Marcel Harris was some guaranteed money this year. Since they did, make that position switch, I do think they really believe that he's going to make this team. That just underlines the positional versatility that the 49ers are looking for. I think they do really want a linebacker who can cover, especially given what we've seen so far from the second team. These guys have struggled to cover the 49ers blue chip players when they're working with Trey Lance. And there's just been big gaps downfield. So I do see Harris making the team, and it's just going to be really interesting here on the right side of the delineating line. Which of these guys does earn a spot? We're talking about Jonas Griffith doing some good stuff for the 49ers, but you do have Hilliard there. And Flanagan Fowles is an interesting player to me because we talk about that positional versatility, Matt. Former safety at Arizona. So this is a guy with a DB background, but the body there, I mean, this is a tall, almost a lanky body for linebacker. Fred Warner was the same way until he bulked up, right? Fred Warner, you asked Fred about this the other day. Why do you think that there aren't as many 6'4" linebackers, as many tall linebackers as you? Because it seems like the 49ers are stocking up on those kind of guys. Between Fred and Flanagan Fowles, the tall guy with the coverage background and the defensive backfield as a safety, it looks like they really covet that kind of length at the position.
Well, they have to do so much coverage stuff that, and we've seen that in action. We've seen Fred Warner leaping up and grabbing balls from tight ends. We saw Jonas Griffith a couple of times cutting into the throwing lane and snatching at a Trey Lance throw. But I agree with you on Flanagan Fowles. He's been the guy who's been filling in for Azeez Al-Shaair. So he's obviously the number 4 guy. Number 3 if Azeez is out for any period of time. And he's also good on special teams. So I think that we could probably safely move him into the active roster zone right now. I'm
doing it.
All right, so let's do it. People are watching art in progress here. This is how it's done.
This kid James Burgess off the team. Off the 53-man roster, not the team.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the nice thing about having all these young linebackers like Jonas Griffith, like Justin Hilliard, like Elijah Sullivan. They'll probably safely go on the practice squad. No one's going to be champing at the bit to sign those guys to the active roster. So you can keep a Marcel Harris. He's got good versatility. He's good on special teams on the active roster. And if there's there's an injury to one of the top guys, you can easily bring a Hilliard onto the active roster at a later date. So that's probably what their vision is for that position right now. I think they've got to feel pretty good about linebacker. That's always been, ever since the first couple of years of the Shanahan regime, basically since Fred Warner has gotten in there. Warner and Greenlaw have been working together. It's been a pretty steady and stable position group, has not been decimated by injuries like some of these other ones. So I think they've got to feel pretty good about that core group.
Here's a good question. How has Marcel Harris looked at coverage at linebacker? The way I would answer this is, well, he's looked the same in coverage as he did back at safety, right? Same guy, same player. But by moving him to linebacker, he's going to theoretically have fewer coverage assignments, and B, the coverage assignments that he has are going to be closer to the line of scrimmage. And along those lines, I remember a couple plays already now from the first 8 days of camp where Marcel Harris was all over a running back coming out of the backfield, physical coverage near the line of scrimmage, and he's made a couple pass breakups. Now, this might have been with the third team because I think that's where he started this training camp. But still, I think it's been a promising start, and it makes sense, right? Where Marcel Harris struggled was in the deeper coverage assignments at safety. We saw him just get cooked in that famous game against the Saints in 2019 by Jared Cook. That pun was not intended, but it ended up working out. But that was the game through which a lot of fans became frustrated with Marcel Harris's downfield coverage abilities. And it sounds like the 49ers were concerned with that too, based on the fact they moved him closer to the line. But I've seen exactly, I think, what the 49ers thought they would see if you move Marcel Harris closer to the line of scrimmage with greater consistency. And that's some physical pass breakups on short passes near the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, he's gotten his hands on a lot of balls. And I think he's been filling the gaps well in the run game, too. That's something that's harder for us to see because there's no tackling or whatnot. But that's been my sense of it. I remember in 2018, specifically a game in Seattle, the 49ers lost that game, but it was one of those where Jaquiski Tartt was injured and Harris as a rookie went in there and he was great around the line of scrimmage. Very aggressive, sure tackler. And that's when at least some readers started asking about the possibility of moving him to linebacker. And lo and behold, a few years later, the 49ers did exactly that. So around the line of scrimmage is his bailiwick. I guess the big question is, how is he going to take on pulling guards and centers and tight ends and things like that? Is he going to be big enough, strong enough to do that? But he, even as a safety, he wasn't that far away from a linebacker, today's linebacker weight. I think he's 215. It'd be interesting to see what he is right now. But, some of these linebackers are in the 220s these days. So, like I said, it's not a far cry for him to sort of get into that accepted linebacker range.
Yeah, we're a long ways away from the day when Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis would line up at 240 plus. That was what made those two guys so special, is that back when they had to be heavier in, that more run heavy day of in those more run heavy days of the NFL, both of those guys were able to maintain that strength and that weight and still cover at that weight, which is, why I think, Bowman's career might have been, Bowman's career, we talk about Patrick Willis's Hall of Fame contention, right? Navarro Bowman, did he play a little bit? He played a little bit longer at the end. I'm wondering how long his prime was. When you never hear Navarro mentioned in those discussions, he was kind of the Robin to Patrick Willis's Batman. But I think that both of them did stuff that only special players do, as far as combining the ability to play big and play fast at the same time. You see so much of this specialization now, all these guys moving to try to be good in coverage, and the 49ers obviously doing that, but it's the ability to do both that made Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis so special. And I think that 49ers fans are going to value that for a long time, given how the league is changing now, because they kind of saw the last of a dying breed with those two great players.
Yeah, I think 2013 was Navarro Bowman's high watermark. He was the best linebacker in football that year, and just gave such a Herculean effort in that championship game in Seattle, which is where, of course, he was injured and his career was never really the same. I think he was a third-round draft pick in 10, didn't play much as a rookie, and really only played 11, 12, and 13. Those were his only pre-injury seasons. He played a little bit after that, of course. But those were those were, I mean, there are so many highlight plays that he had at big moments too. Everybody remembers, of course, closing candlestick with that interception, but he also batted away a pass at the end of that championship game in Atlanta that sent the 49ers to the Super Bowl. I mean, it was one colossal play after another. There was the should have been forced fumble in the 2011 championship game against the Giants. Remember that one where one referee was saying that there was a fumble and the other said that he had blown the whistle dead. I think of all the things that Navarro Bowman wished could be kind of taken back as far as plays like that. He was always incensed about that. But that was the big play at a big moment. He got it, and the referees sort of gave the Giants a break on that one.
Yeah, 49ers kicked the game-winning field goal if that fumble is
absolutely.
Yeah, that game was a tug of war. It was about who was going to blink first.
Exactly.
Like the Giants blinked first, but since the officials didn't allow it, Kyle Williams blinked first on the 49ers end.
He blinked twice. Yeah, he blinked first and he blinked second. Yeah.
And almost 3 times. I still remember in that game, I mean, I don't want to drive down our viewership count here, but I'm sure it's not down. Kyle Williams dove to catch a fair catch earlier in that game, which you just don't do, right? If it's a fair catch, you're completely trying to mitigate any risk on the play. You can't dive for it because that makes it a very risky play by definition in a wet game, and that was a very rainy day at Candlestick.
Yeah.
So he had the biggest off day of his career on the biggest day of his career, and that's all you can really say about that. These are Navarro Bowman's stats. He had those first 4 years, 3 prime years, and then he tore the ACL and the MCL. Right here, as you can see, I'm highlighting that season. That's at the end of the 2013 season against Seattle. Missed all of 2014. This always stood out to me about Navarro Bowman. He came back as, in the second highlighted row here, as a prime player after that torn ACL. In 2015, 154 tackles. That was a career high. Obviously, a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that Patrick Willis was no longer around. But, I mean, he had a really good season in 2015, back to all-pro form. But then he suffered 4 games into 2016, the Achilles. That was the third highlighted season here. And after that, he never rebounded. He played for the 49ers and the Raiders. They traded him in 2017. So, a great player like Navarro Bowman was able to overcome 1 major injury, the ACL, but not 2. It was that second one that took his quickness away by 2017. I still remember early in that year, he just didn't have it anymore. That actually overlapped with Shanahan. That was when I started covering the team.
Yeah, I think that 2015 season, he not only set a career high, I think he led the league in tackles that year, which I've always found to be a bit of a interesting stat. I mean, I think you have to be a really good player to do that, but I think you also have to be on a really poor defense to do that too. It means that a lot of teams are running against you. And I think that was the beginning of the end of that elite 49ers defense. I remember how bad they were in 2016. They were just atrocious against the run. But they probably were starting to show signs of that the year before.
Yeah, one of the worst run defenses in NFL history in 2016. And then the 49ers, that's the first thing they turned around after Shanahan and Robert Saleh took over in 2017. They actually turned into a decent run defense again first, but they couldn't turn the corner and turn into a good overall defense until they got those edge rushers. And obviously they showed up in 2019, and it looks like they have some again. When you look at Sansa Mebicom, obviously what Nick Bosa should bring to the table after he's fully back. They're slow playing that. But, Matt, we have to bring it back full circle. We first, reported this back in February. D Ford was gunning to come back. I know that you and I were both skeptical as well, but it was solid information. He was out there running. He was training at the 49ers facility, and that's all come to fruition now. He is in 11-on-11 drills before Nick Bosa. I mean, if they had that as a prop bet in Vegas, you would have made a lot of money. I did not expect to see D Ford out there ahead of Nick Bosa this season.
No, he's been. I mean, people are asking me what have been the surprises of camp so far. I would put him, close to the top of the list, maybe after Trey Lance. But yeah, on Tuesday in particular, he was out there. It wasn't with the first team group. It wasn't a full practice by any stretch, but you could tell that he was testing himself. He tried a speed rush on one snap. He tried a bull rush against Mike McGlinchey and actually drove him back on another rush. So he was very active and he wasn't hesitant at all. He was kind of, throwing himself into the mix to see what he can do. I don't think his get off is 2018 or early 2019 levels yet, and that's what D Ford's specialty is. So I think he's going to be working on that. But they've got to be encouraged that this is maybe a bonus that back in February and March and April they were very, very skeptical about having. And when it comes to that edge rush, the more the merrier. As far as guys flying off of those wide nine positions.
The interior is going to be strong on that defensive line. I think that was a given entering this season. Kevin Givens is part of it. It's just working out for me with these puns.
Another pun. Wow, 2 for 2.
I never noticed them until after I say them. Oh, this one's good. I got to incorporate this in the writing. But we know that the interior will be deep. It's going to be hard to match the frontline explosiveness that the interior showed in 2019 because they don't have DeForest Buckner anymore. But in terms of the quality wave after wave of player that you get when you do have a lot of good bodies there, I think this team is very situated for that. Obviously, you have Javon Kinlaw. Obviously, you have Eric Armstead. If the edges perform and stay healthy at the way that the 49ers want them to, that means that Armstead gets to play a tackle much more than on the outside. And that helps that interior line room that also has Zach Kerr, that also has Kevin Givens, that also has Maurice Hurst, DJ Jones is your prototypical one technique nose tackle that can also play at the 3 technique because he's more athletic than your typical fire hydrant type player in the middle. So there's just a whole lot to work with on the inside of the 49ers defensive line. And, now we've started to see them specialize in some of these drills before practice. Chris Kasarik is taking the defensive tackles and working with them specifically. And then he takes his assistant, Daryl Tapp, and Tapp goes over to another portion of the field and he's working with the defensive ends. And when you start to see that delineation, you start to understand visually just how deep that defensive tackle room is for the 49ers. And, I talk about the 2017 team. The first thing they fixed was, the run defense. Well, I think by extension, the defense is built from the inside going out. And if you could shore up that inside with the defensive tackle spot, everything else can kind of flow from that. I'm not saying that you don't need good edge rushers. You obviously do. But by having that sturdy inside presence that the 49ers, I think, will obviously have, that's going to make the edge guys better, and the edge guys are already really good, at least on the front line, right, between Bosa and Ford and Ebukam, and then that's going to make the whole defense a lot better. And this is a defensive line-oriented unit. 49ers are all about the rush over coverage. The analytics people don't like that, but it's worked for the 49ers, and I think they're set up for it to work again here in 2021.
Yeah, and you could even make the argument that heading into camp, we knew that interior line group was going to be deep, and it's even deeper 7 days in because Kentavious Street is better than everybody expected he would be. He got praise from D'Amico Ryans early on, and then they've only had one real offensive line versus defensive line pass rush drill to this point, but Street kind of lived up to the billing. He looked really good in that, and then had a good practice afterwards. So there's him. I mean, a guy like Darian Daniels, he's not going to make the active roster. He's probably earmarked for the practice squad, but he's a guy sort of like Kevin Givens a couple of years ago who undrafted, injuries. He got into the mix a little bit towards the end of the season, played, I don't know how many snaps, a handful, not many. But the point being is that he got a taste of it and he knew what he has to do. And so he's entered the second season. He's looked good too. I mean, he's not going to make the team, but I'm just kind of trying to illustrate how many worthy bodies they have in that interior section. So he's another one. If they did have a spate of injuries, he's somebody that they could easily call up and would be just fine on that line.
All right, you ready for the view count to skyrocket? Let's give the people what they want. Ben Winter is in a black hole, and the only thing that will satiate his hunger is Trey Lance hype. So let's talk a little bit of Trey Lance. You can't go too long without talking Trey Lance these days with the 49ers, and also a good chance for us to put this in further perspective. I know you mentioned earlier, Matt, and we've both been talking about the fact that this has been against the second-team defense. You have to point out that most of the deep completions have come with a backup linebacker trailing far behind either a wide receiver or a tight end, which is not ideal. That obviously makes the decision-making easier for Trey Lance. I mean, if you do see Jonas Griffith 5 yards behind Trent Sherfield, the right read is to go to Trent Sherfield. It's, 1 + 1 = 2 stuff. That being said, for those of you that want Trey Lance hype, I think that I can give it to you while being objective and accurate about it. He has looked tremendously athletic. He has the type of power arm combined with the pro-style refinement that led the 49ers to be confident in investing so much in him to trade up and draft him at number 3. And truly, I think the physical skill set, regardless of which unit Trey Lance is going against, regardless of whether it's a practice or a game, the physical skill set, when you see it from up close, is wow-worthy. That doesn't mean that he's going to be a great player. We can't anoint him that yet. He hasn't played a game. He hasn't taken a throwing snap against a first-team defense or played behind the first-team offensive line for a passing play. So you put the cart way out in front of the horse if you start doing that. But Trey Lance has done all that he can given the opportunity that's been given to him so far. And I thought that it was really important that he has wowed us physically so far, because the big reason the 49ers traded up to draft him and didn't settle for a guy like Mac Jones down at number 12 is because they needed that potentially transcendent physical skill set. And I think we can confirm that potentially transcendent physical skill set is indeed there. And that's the big news so far out of the QB position at 49ers camp.
Yeah, I've got to think that the 49ers right now have to feel really, really good about the decision they made to draft him at number 3, to jump up from 12 to 3, give away all that draft capital. He has looked better than expected. I think that's why there's been so much sort of gushing about him. He looked fine in OTAs. He looked the part. You saw him drop back. You saw him sort of go through his progressions, and he usually went with the safe check down. Exactly what you would expect from a rookie just learning things. Comes back into training camp 40 days later, or however many days it was, and he's a different guy. He is attacking everything. He attacks on those deep crosses. He attacks deep down the sideline. He attacks the seam. He started attacking with his legs just a few days ago. That's the word. I mean, he's been aggressive. He's been bold. He hasn't been like a rookie. He hasn't been hesitant at all. And I think that's what has kind of caught everybody's attention. And I'm sure Kyle Shanahan, who happens to be a pretty aggressive guy in his own right, just is salivating over what he's seeing. Now, Shanahan can't say that to us because of what you said. They're not anointing any rookies at this point. They want to keep pressure on him as much as possible. They're not going to say goodbye to Jimmy Garoppolo at any point soon. It would be, unless they're overwhelmed by a proposal, it would be silly for them to do that. So they've got to sort of try to be restrained in everything they say, and that's what they have been. I wanted to talk to you about his arm because I think it's interesting. I don't think he has like a Matthew Stafford arm or even a Josh Allen arm. Josh Allen, somebody who was compared to a lot in the draft, but it's obviously the best arm on the team and probably the biggest one since Colin Kaepernick has been here. Like I said, he is taking the ball to all aspects of the field. There is not one throw that he's been scared to attempt, and he's made all of them. So that's been impressive at this point.
I think It is a power arm. I'm on the record saying power arm a lot here over the past few days because I've seen it in person. I wasn't sure he had a power arm just based on the tape when I was looking at this in the pre-draft process. But in person, it does jump out of his hand. I love the delivery on play action. You know, anytime he's coming off that fake, finding the man 20, 25 yards downfield, he's thrown some lasers. They've knocked the 49ers receivers back a little bit. But I can say that without saying that it's at a Stafford level. I mean, Stafford, Josh Allen, those are two of the top power arms in the game right now. Lance's might be a little bit weaker than that, but what we've also seen is the ability to throw with some touch. I mean, there was the jump ball to Kittle early on in training camp that I thought he placed perfectly. Yesterday, he had to get that deep pass over, 3 defenders to George Kittle. With the requisite amount of touch. He's thrown in some of those one-on-one red zone situations with the appropriate amount of touch. And at the end of the day, touch is going to be way more important than the guy's ability to throw the fastball at 96 miles an hour consistently, which I think that, Trey Lance can do. Maybe his fastball is only 93, 94 versus a guy like Stafford who's throwing 99, 100, right? But it's just like the baseball analogy continues. If you could deal with control, if you can, feather some balls in there, if you can throw the changeup, you could throw whatever else you need to throw, you're going to be a very successful pitcher, or in this case, a very successful quarterback. And I think that Trey Lance has shown us enough versatility so far that he, showcases that he does indeed have the fastball. It might not be, closer's level fastball, but it's enough of a power arm to be a starting quarterback in the NFL that really does some stuff. But he can also mix it in with the other deliveries. And the fact that he's shown the mental wherewithal so far to know when to use each one, I don't care if he's getting, his hand held by Kyle Shanahan through all these plays or not. He still has shown the ability to do it without seeming like it's too much for him at the NFL level. I think that's great news for the 49ers. And it's going to be really fun to see Trey Lance try to progress to the next milestone. And for me, the next milestone is making sure that Kyle Shanahan is happy with all the decisions that he's making. Because we don't see that from the sideline. We don't see the all 22. We don't see where he's supposed to go with the ball. And B, taking that, packaging that, and doing it all against better competition. So those are the two next things. But as far as arm talent, I've seen a lot of good stuff from Trey Lance, given the parameters that have been set up for him already.
I thought his best throw of training camp was the one to Sherfield, not only because it hit him on the run and Sherfield didn't have to break stride and he ran into the end zone for a touchdown. But it started with a scramble. He bought more time with his feet, probably could have run for, 12, 15 yards, but he kept his head upfield and saw Sherfield, like we've been saying, against Jonas Griffith, a linebacker, and knew that was the better play. And that's something he did at North Dakota State a lot. That, he certainly had a running element to that game, but he wasn't run only. He wasn't, I'm gonna go through one, maybe two progressions, and if it's not there, I'm taking off. His head is always up, and like you said, he's got and that was a touch pass. I mean, he was on the move, so he didn't have to fire it in there. It was just a little flick of the wrist, and it still traveled a good distance to get to Sherfield. So. You're right. I mean, it's been a variable arm. I think if you isolate his arm, it's not as strong as the Stafford arm. It's probably you isolate the arm, it's not as creative as Aaron Rodgers or a Patrick Mahomes. But he's got elements of each of those guys. When he shows his power is when he gets his physique, his 6'4", 224 pounds. Into the throw, and you see that sometimes you just see him uncoil into those throws, and those are mainly those deep crosses where he's driving the ball into the teeth of the defense. And when you see him put his full strength into his passes, it's probably traveling as fast as anybody in the league at that point. That'd be an interesting question to ask some of these receivers, like where does that stack up against some big throwers that you have caught from in the past?
He generates a lot of that torque from the core, and that's the great thing about Shanahan's play action is, it sets stuff up for these offensive players, namely the quarterback. They have to be able to pick up the defense and the route trees after they take their eyes off of it. But when they do, theoretically, if the play action is called at the right time, the pocket is clean, the guy is open, the quarterback has a chance to set up, and he has a chance to wind up and throw that fastball. So he's using the core, he's using the 6'4", 220 plus or whatever it is to be able to deliver that ball. And so far, I think that Trey Lance has been accurate on those throws, and we know how many of them Kyle Shanahan calls. So they're very, very important to be able to hit accurately. And I think part of the reason the 49ers were so confident picking Trey Lance is that they saw him doing at least some of that at North Dakota State with the pro-style offense, the ability to take your eyes off the defense, execute a good fake, and then find your target and deliver the seed. I mean, that is something that's not, taken for granted. In fact, Jimmy Garoppolo had to learn really how to do that at a consistent NFL level when he came over to the 49ers, because at Eastern Illinois, he's playing out of the gun. They're playing a lot of 5-wide spread stuff. It was the run and shoot offense. Dino Babers now at Syracuse. It was a complicated variation of the air raid that Dino Babers picked up during his time at Baylor that Jimmy Garoppolo was running at Eastern Illinois at college. And then the Patriots picked Jimmy, and he's in the Patriot style offense, which the 49ers ported, some of those philosophies over to their offense. But Shanahan is still going to be Shanahan. It's still going to be a lot of under center, a lot of play action, and that's a completely different skill set as far as taking your eyes off the defense and then reacquiring the signal downfield and then being able to deliver. So Trey Lance already had that background, unlike Jimmy Garoppolo in college. And I think that's one reason why we see him, at least technically, look so advanced as far as some of that play action goes. As far as comparisons go, I said this yesterday on the show. People always ask me for a comparison, and I'm very careful to qualify this because how people take stuff out of context these days. This is only from a physical perspective. Okay, I'm not saying that Trey Lance is already one of these two players, but I've seen a hybrid from a physical perspective of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And the reason I say that is because Josh Allen has the size. Josh Allen brings you 6'5". I mean, the guy looks like a linebacker, big boy, right? 240 pounds, probably 230, somewhere around there. Worked on the farm in the Central Valley, so we know that he's got those good genes to be the quarterback and to really just power the ball downfield. In fact, Josh Allen, he made it look easy when he played the 49ers last year. Some of those throws were crazy. They don't look impressive just because he's so strong. Whereas Patrick Mahomes is not quite as big as a Josh Allen, and everything that Patrick Mahomes does looks really impressive because he's got a little bit of that flair, right? It's not going to be as standard as Josh Allen. It's going to be a little bit of backing up, a little bit of moving to the wrong side, twisting the hips, flicking the ball. And just like you said, Trey Lance had the arm flick play where that ball hit Trent Sherfield and stride 40 yards downfield. We've seen a little bit of that physically also from Trey Lance. So that's why I say physically, I've seen a hybrid of those two guys. Obviously, the 49ers have seen the same thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have traded up to draft this guy at number 3. And obviously, he wouldn't look so good against a second-team defense so quickly if some of those physical skill sets weren't there. So Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. I'm saying from an early physical look, I think that Trey Lance brings some of those gifts to the table.
Yeah, again, going back to the first sort of theme, he's been unafraid to attempt any sort of pass. There was a pass in yesterday's practice where he is running away from pressure, pretty much full speed to his left. And he's about to go out of bounds, and he flings one, not to the middle of the field, but back towards the center, only an 8 to 10 yarder to Brandon Ayuk, but it's a gutsy throw. I mean, the old adage is you never kind of throw across the field because that's where defenders are lurking. But he did it, which shows his that boldness I was talking about, and B, he was physically able to do that. I mean, running full speed in one direction and throwing back the other. It wasn't quite Patrick Mahomes. It didn't have the kind of elasticity, I think, that that baseball throw that Mahomes has, but it was in that vein. So I definitely see what you're saying there. I remember talking to Scott McLuhan about it, and he saw Steve McNair, the former Titans quarterback, when he looked at Trey Lance, and maybe that ultimately will be sort of the type of quarterback he is. Big arm, able to run. I agree with you, though. There's a little bit more creativity, I think, in that arm than maybe Steve McNair had during his career. Again, we're putting the cart way ahead of the horse. I'm sure the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan doesn't want all this gushy praise of him at this point. It's so early, but boy, the early returns have been impressive.
Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about physical skill set. That's all we can do right now. We don't see Kyle grading where Trey Lance is going with the football. We don't see what it would look like against a better defense. Those are all things that we have to qualify with. Otherwise, we're just getting carried away. But as far as the physical skill set goes, that's something that we absolutely see and can talk about. And that's so significant to me because of Kyle's history and the way that he was brought up in this game. His dad, Coach Steve Young, who was, I just finished an article about him that ran the other day for our NFL Top 100. And what I wrote about was the fact that Steve Young was an all-world athlete at the quarterback position to begin his career. And then he had to learn how to throw. And then by the end of it, he was the most efficient passer in NFL history. So he combined both of those things. Steve Young combined athleticism with accuracy and the ability to dissect an opposing defense in the pocket. John Elway was, in a lot of ways, cut from a similar cloth, not as good of a runner, but still very, very athletic and also obviously able to win from the pocket. So Mike Shanahan saw so much success with these guys that could do both, that only made sense that Kyle would want, a taste of that as well. And that's why, tracking Trey Lance and seeing that athleticism confirmed to us in person, combined with the fact that he's not afraid to throw and throw creatively. It's not just like a robot out there that's not sure where to go with the ball. And, there's an element of natural to him as far as the pocket and the throwing game goes. I think that's extremely relevant to what Kyle Shanahan's overarching vision is, given the fact that Steve Young, John Elway, that's part of the Shanahan tree, right? And I think we have to be looking at this in a big picture perspective. Otherwise, you won't get it. Otherwise, people will get too hung up on Garoppolo versus Lance and who's going to start week one. And it's like, this is a 15-year process for the 49ers. They want Trey Lance to be there for a decade and a half, winning multiple rings for them. That's why you make this trade. You want Trey Lance to be one of the greats. I don't know if he's going to end up like that, but that's the goal, right? So, if we're obsessing over every single rep at camp and when Jimmy Garoppolo is going to leave and, who's going to start week one, I think we're fixating on a tree instead of the forest. And I'm trying to see the big picture here. And through the athleticism I've seen so far and some of those decisions, some of that creativity, I think we're getting a glimpse out of what Shanahan really wants in the long run.
Well, sure. I mean, we've just seen sort of a microcosm of it in the first 7 days. I mean, Trey Lance didn't take a single run until very recently in practice. So it's just this idea that no matter what you're going to be able to throw at Kyle Shanahan from a defensive standpoint in coming years, he's always going to have an answer to it because of what we've just been describing. You've got a multifaceted quarterback in Trey Lance. Does the deep stuff, does the intermediate stuff, does the short stuff, does the running. And I think, not to bash Jimmy Garoppolo, I think Garoppolo's had a fine start to camp. But everything that we're talking about sort of highlights Garoppolo's shortcomings. Garoppolo doesn't throw deep. He doesn't throw outside the numbers. He's not a runner. So it's just expanding everything for Kyle Shanahan. And you're right. There's no rush to do it. I think the bottom line, though, is that the 49ers are probably more able or more reassured is the word that if something were to happen to Garoppolo, if he struggles early in the season, this guy's going to be able to kind of step in and take things over. And a month ago, I'm not sure they would have been as confident as they are right now about that.
Yeah. Well, before we sign off, Matt, why don't we take a look at some of your recent pieces to make sure people go and read them. Again, thank you for coming on here to the YouTube. This is the second time. You're the only guest so far, but it's always extremely popular with people when you come on. So, I mean, you've written some good stuff here throughout camp. I'm just going through your page on the Athletic. What piece do you want to pop open right here on the screen?
Well, I feel bad because there have been maybe 7 practices, and I think I've written about Trey Lance on 5 of them. But sometimes when you're waiting for something to pop in a practice, you got to kind of go with the number 3 overall pick. You got to go with what happens, and Trey Lance definitely has popped. I mean, one thing I wrote about, and Nick Bosa later, discussed this, is that he not only has come back from his ACL injury, probably faster than anybody thought he would. He's kind of reshaped his body a bit. He's a little bit leaner. He's a little bit lighter. Everything about this defense we've been talking about is about quickness. It's about firing off the ball. It's about aggression. And as good as he was in 2019, he decided he was going to alter his body a little bit to be even more quick and more aggressive this season. And I think you'll agree with me. He has looked good in the kind of scant times that we've gotten to look at him. He should be fine for week 1. I don't know how much we're going to see of him in the preseason. Probably very little, if at all. They want to be cautious with him, but he's shown in the past that he doesn't need a preseason to be very effective in the first game of the season.
Well, I just right here, that's the link to the article. I just put it in the comment section. So all of you that see that link, you go to the comment section, copy and paste it, and you can go see Matt's article on Nick Bosa, where actually, Matt, you're the first to report this, that Nick Bosa will be quicker, or he is quicker now than he was before the knee injury. And that's according to some of the drills that he's done that are timed as far as get off goes and speed around the edge goes. So he has cut a little bit of that weight. This picture is obviously from before the injury, where he was a little bit bulkier. You'll definitely, when you see Nick Bosa the first time, you'll see some of that leaner frame. And, I think a lot of that, also may have to do with what the 49ers have on the rest of the defensive line. And I mean, this is a team that's got some, real girth on the interior. This is a team that's going to be able to come at you from the inside. And I think that might allow Nick Bosa the luxury of being a little bit leaner on the outside and working on that quickness a little bit more, because you have other guys who are going to be able to really stand up stout against the run. So it's going to be a team effort for the defensive line. That Chris Kasarik is coaching the hell out of that group. And I think that Nick Bosa has prepared his body in a way that he feels is best going to complement what the rest of that 49ers defensive line is doing. And what they need those edges to do is to roar around those tackles, get low. Well, we've seen Samson Ebukam do it. Samson Ebukam's getting a lot of insight from Dee Ford, and he's trying to be like Dee Ford in that he went under Mike McGlinchey the other day, and it looked like he was an Olympic speed skater. I mean, he's so low to the ground.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. These tackles are huge these days. I mean, you got to have a lot of 6'7", 6'8" tackles in the NFL. If there's one weakness they have physically, it's guys that can go under them, right? And I think Nick Bosa now, being leaner too, he's going to be more flexible. And I think we're going to see a lot of those low moves that we see Dee Ford and Samson Ebukam deliver once he gets back to team drills.
Yeah, Nick Bosa, lined up inside quite a bit in 2019. I think you're right. There might not be as big a need for him to do that. It'll be interesting to look at his snap counts when the season begins. Just because you might have a Dee Ford and a Samson Ebukam, whether they can be a little bit lighter on him to begin the season, coming off of the ACL, of course, 17 games this season. It's another reason to do that. It'll be that the composition of that line will be interesting. I think both you and I think they'll probably keep 10 defensive linemen, and just how that divides between D ends and D tackles, I think will be pretty interesting.
For the record, look at this. I told you it was going to happen, Matt. Now Lance is better than Mahomes. Come off it, guys. You're talking crazy. I tried to preempt this by saying that that's exactly what I wasn't saying. I was comparing part of Lance's physical skill set to some of what Patrick Mahomes has done. Again, for the record, I'm not saying that Trey Lance is better or even comparable as far as overall quality of player to Patrick Mahomes. He's comparable as far as small things, little nuances about his physical skill set. And that's all what we know that right now. So please, I beg you to not take stuff out of context, especially when we try to qualify it ahead of time. But
we heard you, David. You said that he's going to be better than Peyton Manning and Tom Brady combined. I mean, it was clear.
Second
what your
coming
prediction
Steve
is.
Young, yeah. As soon as he mentions the name Steve Young, he's got to be him.
Right.
Oh man, this kind of stuff drives me crazy. But let's finish up. We talked a little bit about the tackles, and I want to feature one more of your pieces. So I'm going to put this out there as a link. Mike McGlinchey. This is a big story. Mike McGlinchey has put on 25 pounds. The bull rush was a problem for him last year. The link is there for you guys to check it out on The Athletic from Matt. But the bull rush, we'll see if it remains a problem for Mike McGlinchey. But it appears, and based on what Mike McGlinchey is saying, it seems that his lack of weight last year, he's under 300 pounds, created a whole host of problems for him in pass protection.
Yeah, I thought he really articulated that for the first time the other day. It wasn't so much that he was too light to handle the bull rush and was being overwhelmed by the bull rush. It was that he thought he might be too light for that, and that he had to really be overconscious of it, and that he over-prepared for the bull rush sometimes, so that when he braced himself for a bull rush and the guy didn't bull rush him, which happened a couple of times. I went back and I watched that infamous Week 4 game against Philadelphia, and then there was a play at the end of the Washington game, I think that's Week 14, where he has a holding penalty. What he does is he sets himself for the bull rush because he's so conscious of his weight and can I handle the bull rush unless I'm braced for it, that he stops moving his feet. And so the people just got around him and he had to reach out and grab him, or he wasn't able to, and they put pressure on the cornerback. So the idea is that this extra 25 pounds gives him the confidence that he can handle a bull rush even if he's not, on the fly like he should be. And so that's sort of the root of why he decided to do that. My question, though, this is a guy who's already dealt with a couple of minor knee injuries early on. I wonder whether the impetus for him getting light in the first place last year was that he can move better and it's not as hard on his joints over time. I mean, that's what Joe Staley concluded early in his career. It was a brilliant move for him. He's more athletic and maybe more powerful. You've noted this a lot, David. Joe Staley was a sprinter in high school. I mean, he's got sort of that sprinter's explosion and build. McGlinchey is more of the kind of typical lankier offensive lineman. Doesn't have quite that athleticism or probably that strength that Staley had. So he may need to be 315, 320, whereas Staley could get away with it at 290, 295.
Yeah, it's, one of the hardest things in football for these linemen, I don't think people appreciate, is how hard it is to carry that kind of weight. So, you talk about the knee stuff. It's a lot nicer on your body if you could be 20 pounds heavier. Just imagine carrying around a 20-pound backpack at all times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it could be like on your knees, right? So it makes sense that he did lose a little bit of weight when he was dealing with some of that stuff, but it also makes sense that you need some of that strength to maintain the confidence. And I think that's going to be something that we need to keep an eye out for this year. On the very first rep of 11-on-11s on Wednesday, Eric Armstead beat McGlinchey around the edge. And, I don't want to read too much into one rep. I think other than that, McGlinchey has been okay. And it's going to be really hard to quantify this and evaluate this until the actual games start. But that just goes to show you that this is going to be a work in progress, that he's going to have to get used to the new weight. And hopefully for the 49ers' sake, he'll be able to leverage that new weight into, better fortification against the bull rush and also, better footwork, because he'll be more confident in his strength to handle some of those powerful rushers. I mean, that's one of the most important positions in all football is right tackle. Some of the best edge rushers in the game rush over right tackle What we're going to get to see probably as this training camp progresses, he's going to be able to face off against Nick Bosa whenever Bosa's on that side, D Ford when D Ford's usually on that side. I already mentioned a matchup with Ebucom. So this camp is going to be really revealing as far as the offseason work the 49ers put in for guys like Mike McGlinchey and how that might pay off. Well, Matt, if you want to shout something else out, if there's another piece that you want fans to read, go ahead and let them know right now.
Yeah, I mean, you click on our 49ers page and you get all of my stuff and you get all of David's stuff. And we've been at it every day of training camp so far. So there's a lot to look at for our training camp coverage to this point. And there's going to be a lot more. I mean, you mentioned the preseason game against the Chiefs. Both you and I are heading down to LA for the dual practices with the Chargers. That's in advance of another preseason game. So there's a lot already there, and there's a lot coming up to be read as well.
I'm really proud of myself. I managed to include a pie chart in an article today about spending. Look at that. That looks.
I haven't hit that one yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. What's the big light blue chunk there?
DBs, but there's a lot of DBs they're paying. They actually, okay, so here, this is spending by position group. So the biggest one is defensive line, then quarterback, and then DBs. But then, that just tells you what the 49ers are doing. What we need is the comparison to the league average. So here, red means they're spending more than league average at each position, and blue means they're spending less than league average. So DBs, even though that's a big chunk, you could see down here, they're actually spending about league average, a percentage point less.
Yeah, there's so many of them, right?
Yeah, and then this is a table that shows you what all the playoff teams from last year are spending. So interestingly, most of the playoff teams are spending less than league average on the quarterback, and that may explain why the 49ers traded for Trey Lance, because once Jimmy Garoppolo is gone, if that's how it all plays out, then they'll be spending less than the league average on a quarterback, and they'll be able to spend money elsewhere. And you can see the 49ers love to spend money on their defensive line. That's in red up here. So it's just interesting stuff.
It looks like there's a lot of different ways to be good in this league. I mean,
yes,
there's not one cookie cutter formula for where to spend your dough.
And one of the big kind of debates about that is, when you start to zoom in on different things, is the rush versus coverage, right? So, for example, New England with Bill Belichick is the epitome of a team that loves to spend on coverage. They're spending over $30 million more on DBs than the 49ers are this year. But the 49ers are spending like $25 million more than New England on defensive linemen. So it's about where you prioritize assets, and New England tends to think, we could just get bargain bin guys. That's why they tried out Cassius Marsh after the 49ers. Was that before? No, that was before. But still, yeah, guys like Cassius Marsh will come through. The Patriots, or the 49ers, did the whole Cassius Marsh experiment in it was also an experience in 2018, and they realized, well, with our philosophy, we need to have stars coming off the edge. So they're willing to pay for that.
I would wager, and there's no way to confirm this, unfortunately, but my guess is that follows suit with assistant coach pay as well, that the 49ers are paying their D-line coach more than anybody else, and it sort of follows that same pattern that the player expenditure is as well.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're going to do this again here in a few hours. The podcast is back. It probably will come out tomorrow. So we're going to record our first podcast episode of the season. Here's the catch. The Athletics podcast. I know we have a lot of viewers on right now, so that's great. We love doing these YouTube lives, so you can see our faces, but we also love doing the podcast so you can listen to us while you're in the car. So make sure that you subscribe to that. Stay tuned to Twitter, Spotify, Apple, wherever the hell it comes out. I think it comes out on all those things. And that's going to be out tomorrow morning. So here's the catch. 49ers podcast with me, with Matt Barrows, is right there on the screen as well. Thanks to everybody. Thank you to you, Matt. This has been a lot of fun. It's a good way to pass our off day as we rest at home. And I'm looking forward to seeing you out at the field again tomorrow.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I'll talk to you a little later today.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right.